Did Bernie Sanders have a tremendous impact on American politics despite his 2 losses? And why did he lose? Well, those are the things that we're going to talk about with his former deputy campaign manager in 2020, Ari Ravenhoft. He's written a book called The Fighting Soul on the Road with Bernie Sanders. Ari, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Cenk.
No problem. So, Ari, there's a lot of things in the book that are interesting and some things we didn't know. There was a conversation. I'm going to start with this because it's fascinating, and then I want to get to the larger stories. Obama and Bernie Sanders had a meeting in 2018. What happened in that meeting?
So it was this really crazy moment on the before the campaign. Bernie had asked to meet with Obama. I had called his office, scheduled the meeting. We went over to his office, which is just like near Georgetown in DC. And I wasn't planning on being in the meeting. I thought it was just going to be the 2 of them. And there was this weird moment where Obama kind of put his arm around me and put me in the room. So it's me, Barack Obama, and Bernie Sanders, which it's like getting to view these 2 historic figures in conversation with each other was one of like a seminal moment, frankly, in my life. But one remark that I thought really struck me, and I literally left the meeting and wrote it down because it was so, it hung for me, was they first just kind of were chatting, catching up on some issues, and then Barack Obama was like, so Bernie, you're here to talk because you want to run for president. Bernie was like, I haven't made up my mind yet, which is true. He had not made up his mind to run in 2020 at that point, in 2018, but he wanted to get Obama's opinion, and Obama kind of started talking about what he thought the race would shape like, what he thought about other candidates. And then he turned to Bernie and said, Bernie, you're an Old Testament prophet. You give the party a moral voice, but prophets don't get to be king. A king has to make choices that prophets don't. And his point, he kind of furthered the point in saying, like, you have to represent a party with a lot of ideological views. You have to represent maybe a small business owner who doesn't agree with you on a minimum wage. You have to represent a lot of different people. Can you like broaden yourself? Can you make those compromises to represent those people? And I think it said a lot about Obama. It also said a lot about Bernie, that no, Bernie's not going to compromise on things that are core to him. He's going to run as Bernie Sanders, and he will win or lose as Bernie Sanders, regardless of outside pressures, even from a former president who he actually does respect a lot.
Yeah, I think actually that's one of the problems. So I know that that's not a popular opinion, but so Barack Obama is the one who ended him in South Carolina. I mean, yes, Jim Clyburn came out in favor of Joe Biden, and the mythology goes that he made the biggest difference. No, he made the second biggest difference. Barack Obama seemed to have called all of the conservative Democratic candidates and told them to drop out and support Joe Biden. That totally worked, and that was the #1 decisive factor. So does Bernie acknowledge that Obama ended him?
Well, I think there's a historic fact that, by the way, others have reported on. This isn't you or me. This is, a lot of other reporters have reported on what on that going on, because obviously Barack Obama didn't call Bernie to drop out and be like, Bernie, you should drop out and not run. Like, he didn't do that. But there is reporting from a number of reporters exactly what you said, that Barack Obama called other candidates and said, we have to consolidate this field. If we don't, Bernie's going to be the nominee, and that will, according to Obama, I think I disagree with this, I know you disagree with this as well, that would lead to Donald Trump winning again. We can't have this, we need you to drop out right now. And I think you just have to acknowledge that historic fact. There's no, it's not a item, to me, it's not an item for debate. It is a fact of the 2020 race.
Right, so, but Bernie keeps thinking from the outside. I know him a little bit. You, me, and him have had dinners, etc. And I love him as a person. I think he's a fantastic human being. But like all humans, he has weaknesses. And I think his number one weakness in the 2020 campaign was that he liked Joe Biden too much and he respected the establishment too much. I think that if he had ripped his guts out, he would have won. But he doesn't have that in him.
And in the book, there's a really pivotal scene in the book that I think your viewers and I think you, it speaks to at this exact point, because the time to kind of do that was not in February or March. That's kind of almost too late, right? The time to do that is earlier, because it was true that Joe Biden was kind of the one candidate the establishment could unite around. Other candidates, it would be much more difficult to create the unity. Everybody kind of knew that. That's why after South Carolina, if they could have united around Pete Buttigieg after Iowa or his second place in New Hampshire, they would have done that, right? But they knew Joe Biden was the candidate to unite around, and they kind of waited for South Carolina to do that. So the question is, if you want to run that strategy, there was a lot of staff, the staff opinion in general, kind of across the board, was post-August in September, when the campaign is on a downswing and we're into that September debate, Bernie should attack, should go on the attack at that debate right off the bat in his opening statement. That are core to him, he's going to run as Bernie Sanders, and he will win or lose as Bernie Sanders, regardless of outside pressures, even from a former president who he actually does respect a lot.
Yeah, I think actually that's one of the problems. So I know that that's not a popular opinion, but so Barack Obama is the one who ended him in South Carolina. I mean, yes, Jim Clyburn came out in favor of Joe Biden, and the mythology goes that he made the biggest difference. No, he made the second biggest difference. Barack Obama seemed to have called all of the conservative Democratic candidates and told them to drop out and support Joe Biden. That totally worked, and that was the number one decisive factor. So does Bernie acknowledge that Obama ended him?
Well, I think there's a historic fact that, by the way, others have reported on. This isn't you or me. This is, a lot of other reporters have reported on what, on that going on. Because obviously Barack Obama didn't call Bernie to drop out and be like, Bernie, you should drop out and not run. Like, he didn't do that. But there is reporting from a number of reporters exactly what you said, that Barack Obama called other candidates and said, we have to consolidate this field. If we don't, Bernie's going to be the nominee, and that will, according to Obama, I think I disagree with this, I know you disagree with this as well, that would lead to Donald Trump winning again. We can't have this, we need you to drop out right now. And I think you just have to acknowledge that historic fact. There's no, it's not a item, to me, it's not an item for debate. It is a fact of the 2020 race.
Right, so, but Bernie keeps thinking from the outside. I know him a little bit. You, me, and him have had dinners, etc. And I love him as a person. I think he's a fantastic human being. But like all humans, he has weaknesses. And I think his number one weakness in the 2020 campaign was that he liked Joe Biden too much and he respected the establishment too much. I think that if he had ripped his guts out, he would have won. But he doesn't have that in him.
And in the book, there's a really pivotal scene in the book that I think your viewers and I think you, it speaks to at this exact point, because the time to kind of do that was not in February or March. That's kind of almost too late, right? The time to do that is earlier, because it was true that Joe Biden was kind of the one candidate the establishment could unite around. Other candidates, it would be much more difficult to create the unity. Everybody kind of knew that. That's why after South Carolina, if they could have united around Pete Buttigieg after Iowa or his second place in New Hampshire, they would have done that, right? But they knew Joe Biden was the candidate to unite around, and they kind of waited for South Carolina to do that. So the question is, if you want to run that strategy, there was a lot of staff, the staff opinion in general, kind of across the board, was post-August in September, when the campaign is on a downswing and we're into that September debate, Bernie should attack, should go on the attack at that debate right off the bat in his opening statement. In the book, I describe an opening statement was written. Bernie read it. Bernie, in prep, talked about it. He went through it. He practiced it. He agreed to it. We got to the green room. He read it again, which, and that was he wrote it out. He had to memorize it because you can't bring statements out on stage. He wrote it out on his legal pad. He read it. And then in between that moment and going on stage, he just kind of decided, and I described the actual situations, and people can read it in the book. He made a decision not to do it, and he left the green room, and it was only Faz, Shakir, the campaign manager, myself, in the green room with him when he walked out, and we kind of looked at each other and was like, is he gonna do it? And he kind of went out and did the standard Bernie speech that we all love, but certainly wasn't gonna deliver a punch or make a difference in the race in a significant way at that point. I think if you were looking for like a seminal moment, it's that debate moment where he made a choice not to do it.
Yeah, that is definitely the moment, and I was there. And obviously I've got a lot of friends in the campaign, and I knew he made that decision, and I knew we were toast. But for the folks at home, what was in that opening statement?
You saw it later. It was essentially the opening statement was basically like, "Hey Joe, you've been wrong. Like you claim you have the experience, you claim you have the knowledge to be president, but let's talk about everything you've been wrong about," and then just going down and hitting him on trade, hitting him on Iraq, hitting him on his positions on healthcare, just kind of just going through every single thing and just basically saying your experience is the experience of being wrong, was basically the statement.
So he just doesn't have it in him to be mean, and Ari, to this day, I mean he
did.
What's that?
He did it to Pete Buttigieg. He does sometimes. He did it to Pete Buttigieg in New Hampshire. We said Pete Buttigieg is on the rise coming into the New Hampshire primary after Iowa. We said you need to go eviscerate Pete Buttigieg now. And he went out and he agreed, and he went out at the Politics and Eggs breakfast, which is a big political event in New Hampshire, the entire, hundreds of reporters there. And he just started reading headlines about Pete Buttigieg taking billionaire money and basically calling him out for that in a pretty aggressive and forthright way. He did that then. But I think the seminal moment is, you're right, mid-September debate in Ohio, not in Ohio, Houston maybe.
Yeah, and so to this day though, Ari, it seems like the fact that he has, and apparently, by the way, Biden's whole thing of being friendly with politicians, etc., it's old school, it doesn't work. It didn't get him any legislative victories as president, but it worked at the most critical time. It worked with a decent person like Bernie Sanders, who just couldn't, in his mind, be mean to a guy who was nice to him. So Pete Buttigieg is never nice to Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden has been nice to Bernie Sanders, but Bernie doesn't get it. That's a trick. So I don't care. Go ahead.
I think with Bernie, we all know Bernie as a guy who believes in issues and believes those issues very strongly in those issues and kind of doesn't deviate from that. I point this out in the book. He also has a very strong belief that politics has to be conducted a certain way, and he won't deviate from that. And I think this is part of that belief. And for Bernie, it's not just about winning on his issues, it's about winning the way he wants to win.
So Ari, for the people at home, how should politics be conducted according to Bernie?
It should be conducted. I mean, and part of the reason I wrote this book is because Bernie, you know this well, very much hesitates to tell his own story at times, which I think is important and would benefit him as a politician very much. And I felt that story was actually important, is who is this person who is a seminal figure in American history, I believe, who has shifted the country. he doesn't believe in, he believes in kind of, he's a very good counterpuncher, which is why I think he felt comfortable attacking Pete Buttigieg, but he won't throw the first punch. Is very clear throughout his career, right? He'll counterpunch when he feels attacked, but he doesn't think politics should be negative. He thinks politics should be run on issues, and he very much kind of sticks to that.
Yeah, well, he's wrong. They're negative against him. They were viciously negative against him, and it worked. And you don't have to be negative and in a malicious way. You could just state the facts. State the facts. Biden's record was terrible.
Which what the plan was on that's mid-September debate. It was literally state the facts about his record, which is terrible. That was, I mean, you were there, you know enough people on the campaign to, this isn't new information to you, but I do feel like people, it does benefit to understand what happened.
No question, no question. That's why the book is important. It's called The Fighting Soul. Even though I'm out of time, I gotta ask you one more thing. So look, you talk about it, a lot of the press talks about it. Bernie's a seminal figure. No question that he's a historic figure in the ways that you describe him. But then everybody adds, and that's because he's pushed the Democratic Party in his own direction, and now et cetera, et cetera. In his own direction, and now et cetera, et cetera. But Ari, I don't think that second part is true. $15 minimum wage, we don't have it. Medicare for all, we don't have it. All of our progressive issues, we don't have any of them. So we pushed and pushed, but we actually didn't get anywhere. And by the way, here we are. Now Bernie's making the same exact mistake he made on the campaign. He's being super nice to Biden, so Biden has no pressure from the left. If he'd beat up Biden from the left, maybe we would have gotten $15 minimum wage. That's probably a poor example, but some of the issues we certainly could have.
Well, I think let's take the $15 an hour minimum wage. I think this is actually, this is you know, he has not won, and I make that point in the book. We don't have Medicare for all, and I think until we have Medicare for all, by the way, the project of this campaign, the project of Bernie's life, and something that you and I believe in, until we have that, that project is not done, and there's still work to do, and it is incomplete. But take $15 an hour minimum wage. When he started on $15 an hour minimum wage in 2015, it was a crazy radical position inside the Democratic caucus. Now, the overwhelming majority of the caucus supports it like literally supports Bernie's bill, and you don't have the entirety of the Democratic Party, which is the problem. And look, there's still stuff to be done, but you cannot doubt the progress in terms of nobody supporting something to more than 40 Democratic senators supporting something.
Yeah, number one, I don't believe them. I think the great majority of them are liars, and they would just hide behind whoever the last Democratic vote is that betrays the cause and works with the Republicans. They all get the corporate donor money. They're all addicted to the corporate donor money.
But they didn't. As I actually don't disagree with you. My point is, back 5 years ago, they felt no pressure to take that position. There's a reason they feel pressure now to take that position, and there's a reason we shouldn't let up the pressure, and neither should Bernie.
Well, that's exactly my point. I mean, he wasn't even going to introduce $15 minimum wage in that bill, and then when he did, you know, we honestly, progressive base pressured him into it, and I'm thrilled that we did because we found out the 8 Democratic senators who were against us. But Bernie didn't want to do that because that's going to embarrass those senators. If he wanted to fight, he would say, hey, wait a minute, look at that. That's Carper and Coons who voted no on $15 minimum wage. That's Biden's 2 top allies in the Senate, both from Delaware. There's no way in the world he didn't talk to the White House. That means Joe Biden is against the $15 minimum wage. Out the son of a bitch. Out him already. Jesus Christ, fight him. But Bernie won't do it because he likes Biden too much. But you know what? That's being mean to your voters. And so if we're being honest about it, I love the guy. He's a wonderful guy. He's done this rhetorical push that's made a big difference. But he just cannot fight corporate Democrats, and it's made all the difference.
Well, look, I think there is a legitimate criticism, and I think I do talk about it in the book about the pulling the punches on Biden. I don't think there's any doubt that there is a lot of affection, and he definitely pulled punches during the campaign. In terms of impact, I do think it is a very different Democratic Party than 5 years ago, and definitely a different Democratic Party than 10, 15 years ago. And I think a lot of that credit belongs to Bernie.
Can a black progressive win a statewide race in Kentucky? Well, let's find out. Charles Booker is running for the U.S. Senate seat against Rand Paul, and he looks like he's going to win his primary on May 17th. Hasn't happened yet, but he's in good shape here, and he almost won a primary last time around against Mitch McConnell. Charles, welcome back to the show.
Absolutely, good to be back, brother.
All right, great to have you. All right, so look, you got some. Bona fides in government. You're the youngest black person elected in 90 years in Kentucky into the state house. You were a state representative. But last time around when you ran in the primary against Amy McGrath, the establishment came out full force on her side, gave her a ton of money, and you almost caught her anyway. Okay, so this time around, they're not running against you. So I don't know, does that tell you something? Did they think that they didn't quite have a chance of beating you this time around, and are you encouraged by that?
Well, I'm absolutely encouraged, man. I have explained to the people of Kentucky and our campaign and young leaders across the Commonwealth that we've made ourselves inevitable. Party leadership in Kentucky and nationally probably don't want to see a young black man from the hood being the top of the ticket. But because of the message, the work that we're lifting up, fighting for regular people, pushing against the establishment on either side and saying that this is about humanity, they couldn't beat us. And we're going to make history on May 17th.
All right. I think you say that it's from the hood to the holler. Is that, if I'm getting
That's
that right? Okay, so what do you mean by that, especially in the context of Kentucky?
So from the hood to the holler is really a rallying cry. It's a declaration of regular people in communities that are often forgotten and ignored. I'm from the hood, one of the poorest zip codes in Kentucky. And folks that live in hollers, which are in rural areas, it's majority white at this point in time. And we're finding a coalition that's ready to win. And if you look at the map, a lot of the folks in Kentucky that voted for Donald Trump voted for Bernie Sanders too. They're looking for real change anywhere they can find it, and they're finding it in our campaign.
So Charles, oftentimes the media talks about politics like it's a line, right? There's left and there's the right, there's progressives and there's conservatives. But it's not really like that. It's actually a quadrant. There's also populist versus the establishment, and that's a different sphere. And so where would you put yourself in that sphere?
Well, I agree with that assessment. And, a lot of my politics really speaks to a populist lens. And if you think about a place like Kentucky where poverty is generational, industries have preyed upon us. We've been crushed by the opioid crisis. We've been crushed by politicians like Mitch and Rand. There is a desire and a need to fight back and fight together for regular people. And so, I am fighting for real progress. We are fighting against corporate interests. I'm not taking corporate dollars. We're fighting for structural change. And that means that I'm not running simply to say I'm Charles Booker, the Democrat. I'm running to say I'm a Kentuckian who's sick and tired of being screwed and ignored. And if you feel that same way, let's stand together. And I'm proud of what we're building. And I want to share, everyone that's watching now that wants us to get rid of Rand Paul, go to charlesbooker.org and help us in this work.
It's charlesbooker.org, everybody, by the way, .org. Okay, so Charles, Rand Paul has already figured out, hey, Kentucky's populist. To me, Kentucky and West Virginia are the two most populous states. And I agree with you completely. It isn't about red and blue. They used to be represented by Democrats forever and ever and ever. Those two states, it's about populist versus establishment. But the problem is Rand Paul's a fake populist. So how do you defeat fake populism with real populism?
Well, the biggest opportunity we have with Rand Paul is we get to call him out. Most people don't know what he does in Kentucky. And I'll tell you, people laugh at him here just as much as they do nationally. They don't realize that he's actually been screwing us the way that he has because they just see him arguing with Dr. Fauci. But by us shining the light on who this man is, that he's been selling us out for big money interests, that he's been blocking the investments in our infrastructure, that he opposes us getting more health care when we're one of the sickest states, that he tells us we should be fine with poverty. When we show people who he is, they run away from him because they're desperate for change. Now, Kentuckians want someone who's going to fight the establishment, someone who's going to shake up the status quo. And Rand Paul acted like that's who he would be. He's not even a libertarian. He's just a crisis actor and an opportunist. And I'm calling out his BS. And I'm building a movement that's bigger than him at the same time. And that's why we're going to beat him.
So you said he sells out Kentucky for big money interests. How so?
You know, well, if you look at the fact that a lot of his finances, so my campaign's small dollar, regular folks, and I'm proud of that. He's funded by corporations. The pharmaceutical industry loves someone like Rand Paul. All of the big money interests that have been preying on us, the fossil fuel industry. If you look at Mitch and Rand, we have both of them. So I apologize to the country. I'm trying to do my part in that. But at every turn, they're selling us out for these interests to line their pockets. He supported the tax cut for the wealthiest few, but wants to oppose investments in relief in our local government, in our local communities. He doesn't care about us. And at this moment, you know, people see his theatrics, but we're dying because of it. In the pandemic, he's telling folks, you know, burn your mask, don't get vaccines. He's arguing with Dr. Fauci, making a fool of himself.
You know, old school is pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, you know, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? And I go, what are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps f***ing cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? You know, what makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the f? You said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. There's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
I heard of it. I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Easily.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies.
And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join, and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
John, come back.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
Field goal here. It's time to switch to beer.
Oh, man.
Oh, God.
Do your best.
He's a little like... Let's go!
Oh. No one's happy now.
Give him another try.
Oh!
Wow. This is the weirdest game.
Public opinion, your opinion, has zero effect on public policy. The richest people in the country, their opinion has a direct effect.
Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, describes that when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague, quote, always lean to the green. And to clarify, she went on, he was not an environmentalist.
Our government actively serves the richest and the most powerful and turns its back on everyone else.
Finally, end the corruption and get money out of politics and give us back our democracy.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur sparing with you guys. We've got a big show ahead today. We've got a even bigger show ahead for you tomorrow. Tomorrow is primary day in Indiana and Ohio. We'll be doing special election coverage. There's a couple of very important races in Ohio. One on the Republican side too, between JD Mandel and JD Mandel. We'll get to that later in the show. And on the Democratic side, you got Morgan Harper versus Tim Ryan. That's an interesting primary, progressive versus establishment. And then of course, Ohio 11, that's Cleveland, Nina Turner, progressive champion versus Shontel Brown, conservative corporate Democrat who has Trump donors, including the owner of the New England Patriots, oil donors, drug manufacturer donors, and every terrible donor you can imagine on her side. After the race is over, we'll talk a lot more about what people in Congress did and didn't do. But for now, the most important thing, guys, is remember to vote. If you're in Cleveland, if you're in Ohio 11, if you're in Ohio, you've got to vote. You've got to get family and friends to vote. If you know anyone, I'm doing a hashtag find somebody in Cleveland. If you know anyone in Cleveland, find them, ask them for a favor, move their couch for them in return. But ask them for a favor, vote for Nina Turner. It will make all the difference in Congress. If Nina Turner wins, the degree to which I'm going to dance over other people is going to be immeasurable, immeasurable. Okay, and I don't want any BS people coming in here and saying they helped when no one helped other than the Young Turks audience. So we're gonna find out how big, how strong TYT Nation is. If we win this race, it's Nina Turner and you guys against the world. Man, if we win this race, we're gonna, and by the way, they're so dumb. This race is so close. We can easily win it. I can't wait to lord it over our opponents. I can't wait. Make sure you're finding a way to, if you're in Cleveland, vote, find somebody in Cleveland. That's tomorrow, and early voting, of course, has started already, so you can vote today. All right, Anna's got the rest of the news.
All right, let's get right to our first story.
Would you be okay if Donald Trump were president, if he created this Disinformation Governance Board, or if it is in place and he wins again in 2024, that he's in charge of such a thing?
You're about to hear DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas say a whole lot of nothing to a super important question. Watch.
This working group that gathers together best practices, makes sure that our work is coordinated, consistent with those best practices, that we're safeguarding the right of free speech, that we're safeguarding civil liberties, I think is an extraordinarily important endeavor.
Notice that Mayorkas did not answer the specific question in regard to how he would feel if Donald Trump were essentially the leader over a government group that would be determining what is and is not disinformation. And this has to do with a story that's getting a lot more attention lately. It has to do with the Department of Homeland Security and its new Disinformation Board. There are a lot of questions about what the purpose of the Disinformation Board is. We've received some answers in regard to counteracting the false information or disinformation that human smugglers are telling migrants, which is persuading them to come to the border. But I would caution against just buying that argument and thinking that this is a good thing, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a government agency that does not have a good track record in regard to our civil liberties, in regard to our privacy rights, essentially determining what is and is not considered disinformation from foreign actors. But I worry that this would also have an impact on American citizens as well. Now, before I get to the details about what this group would allegedly do, Cenk, I know you guys talked about this on the show recently. It was on a day when I wasn't here. And the conversation was mostly just kind of explaining what DHS has said the Disinformation Board is gonna do. But do you have any concerns that this would have a negative impact on our civil liberties, especially if this is a group that's established during the Biden administration, and then later you get someone like Donald Trump getting reelected as president of the United States again?
I do now, and what caused concern for me was actually this Mayorkas interview. So in the beginning, it looked like they were going to collect threat assessment on actual potential terrorists, right? People who might do violent acts in the United States. Well, given the huge degree of white supremacist terrorism in this country, I agree with that. And but it would have to be only about criminal matters. And as I said on the show on Friday, I'm not interested in pre-crime. I'm not interested in their political opinions, no matter how extreme they are. I'm interested in, are they going to commit crime or are they not? Are they planning to? Do they have an active plan to commit crime? But now that I've seen Mayorkas's answer, I withdraw any and all support from this total BS and ridiculous contraption. Okay, why? But number one, he says, oh no, we're not going to collect any information. We're just gonna do studies of what other countries have done and blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, okay, there's two possible results of that. Number one, if you're just gonna collect studies of what other people have done, why do you need a whole division for it? Then it's totally useless, and I have no interest in it. Couldn't other divisions do that anyway? Isn't that a normal part of your research process in each division? What a useless thing you've set up. Or you're lying and you're going to collect intelligence, but now you're not telling us and you're covering it up. Okay, well, that makes me wonder what kind of intelligence you are going to gather, so I'm out. Either way.
And the problem that I have is the vague answers that he gave to the pretty good questions that Bash was asking during the CNN interview. I was a little concerned from the very beginning once we learned a little bit about this Disinformation Board, because again, we're talking about officials within the Department of Homeland Security serving as the arbiters of what is and is not considered disinformation. And how could you ever argue that that wouldn't become politicized. Even if you totally trust the Biden administration, which I would urge you not to trust any administration, you should always be skeptical of what they're doing. You should consider what the future holds under the leadership of a Republican president. You should also consider what the Republican Party has turned into during the Trump era and how it's further devolved. And when we talk about freedom of speech, civil liberties, on a surface level, conservatives pretend like they care about those things. But I have no doubt that if you essentially expand the powers for the federal government and allow them to be the arbiters of what is and is not disinformation, that could lead to some pretty serious problems. If you have a right-wing president in charge, it could be politicized and used against, obviously, the left wing. So I want to give you another portion of the interview featuring Mayorkas, and I want you to pay close attention to his wording because, again, I feel that he says a whole lot of nothing here. Let's watch.
What will it do?
So what it does is it works to ensure that the way in which we address threats, the connectivity between threats and acts of violence are addressed without infringing on free speech, protecting civil rights and civil liberties, the right of privacy. And the board, this working group, internal working group, will draw from best practices and communicate those best practices to the operators because the board does not have operational authority.
Will American citizens be monitored?
No.
Guarantee that.
Well, so what we do, we in the Department of Homeland Security don't monitor American citizens.
You don't, but will this board change that?
No. The board does not have any operational authority or capability.
Bash missed an opportunity there because she took what Mayorkas said about the DHS at face value. That was a huge mistake because, I mean, as recently as this year, the Brennan Center has released reports detailing how the Department of Homeland Security has in fact monitored American citizens. I actually want to direct you to a Brennan report that came out last year, and it talked about how really the surveillance powers for the Department of Homeland Security were expanded under the leadership of the Obama administration, and Biden has actually doubled down on that. Let me give you the details. The Obama administration began to entrench countering violent extremism initiatives. Programs in this mold recruited community leaders, social workers, teachers, and public health providers purportedly to help identify people who were at risk of becoming violent extremists. Instead, these efforts broadly painted members of American Arab and Muslim communities as terrorists and everyday political activism and religious practices as signs of violence. While President Biden promised during the election that he would scrap such programs, his administration has instead doubled down on this same basic approach, funding efforts that direct the public to report supposedly suspicious activity or behaviors, including vaguely defined indicators such as having a grievance, being socially isolated, or behaving unusually to the police or to threat assessment teams involving law enforcement. And this is absolutely being done under the Department of Homeland Security toward American citizens, not just foreigners. These programs, which are run out of DHS's new Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, CP3 as it's referred to, are essentially a repackaging of the repudiated CVE programs that relied on unscientific criteria to flag potential threats. I have more details about this, but the point that I'm trying to make here is Mayorkas was not, either he doesn't know what goes on within the department that he is the leader of, which I'm not buying, or he's just straight up lying on cable news, which is not a far-fetched idea. And again, we have certain constitutional rights, and we willy-nilly gave up so many of our civil liberties after 9/11. I would just caution anyone who is concerned about disinformation coming from foreign governments or from human smugglers to really consider how oftentimes when these government agencies are formed, whenever these governmental groups are formed, there's always that cover story, right? There's always that, oh no, this is actually a good thing because it's meant to keep you safe. This is actually a good thing, it's meant to keep migrants safe. But it's very easy for power to be abused once you expand the surveillance powers and honestly the determination that the government might have in regard to what is and is not considered disinformation?
So, first of all, his answers were all mealy-mouthed BS. Every one of them. Oh, we're not doing anything at all. We're just gathering information that's non-information. This is something that other departments are doing, and blah blah blah. Then why did you set it up? So you're not. It has no operational authority. He said that like 3 times in the interview, maybe 4. Okay, then why'd you set it up? What is it? Like, what's the point of it if it's totally impotent? Oh, okay, we're just gonna look around at other reports and report the reports. Okay, now problem number 2. He's lying. Department of Homeland Security, as Anna just pointed out to you, has often looked into, investigated Americans. It's largely never been a problem because they largely investigated people on the left and Muslims. So the right wing loved that, Democrats loved that, the mainstream media loved that. Never raised an issue, no one, right? The minute you say, hey, maybe we should look into the actual terrorists, right now, the overwhelming majority of which domestic terrorists in America are white supremacists. All of a sudden the right wing goes, oh my God, those are our brothers in arms. How could you do this? And then immediately the cowards run away. Then shut the goddamn thing down. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna do nothing with it. But since they called it the Ministry of Truth and pretended you were collecting information about Americans, or maybe you are and you're hiding it, but either if you're doing that, don't if you're lying about it, or you're not doing any of that, it's useless. But then Trump's gonna come into office and go, oh yeah, the Democrats were collecting information. Now we're gonna collect information on everyone on the left, every black person, every Muslim person, every person that isn't Christian, white, fascist. We're collecting information on, and we're immediately gonna use it. It's such a classic weak Democratic move. It's the Democratic Party and its leaders are hopeless. That interview there was a picture of weakness and cowardice.
Absolutely. And again, always be a little suspicious, at least a little suspicious about any kind of expansive effort to provide more power to a government agency, especially a government agency, again, that does not have a good track record in regard to its surveillance powers and how it's abused it in surveilling American citizens. So I am concerned about this. And when the right wing fearmongers about it, I think that they do have a point. Of course, they fearmonger about it while the Biden administration is in charge, but you know that they'll be thinking differently once you have a Republican president in charge. And we don't want that. We don't want to have a politicized group make determinations about what is and is not acceptable speech. All right, let's move on to some
Anna,
other. Yes.
Before we move on to other news, I have breaking news.
Go ahead.
So Congressional Progressive Caucus had not endorsed Nina Turner, progressive champion, co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign. And then they put out a statement saying that it was a unanimous vote, that everybody voted for Shontel Brown's endorsement in the Progressive Caucus. It seemed like an absurd, outrageous thing to say. We of course demanded transparency and wanted to know the vote. Well, guess what just happened? Breaking news, AOC has just endorsed Nina Turner.
Oh, wow.
So apparently not unanimous, Okay, so Mark Pocan, Pramila Jayapal have a lot of explaining to do. Did they lie? Why did they lie? What was the actual vote? Why are they lying to me is the most important part. But putting that aside, hey, AOC, thank you, okay? Look, I wish all of them had done it and I wish all of them had done it earlier. But a little bit of unity here at the end as people begin to see, oh, wait a minute, actually Nina Turner might win. And all of a sudden, right? But hey, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the first progressive in Congress to back Nina Turner the day before her election. So far, no one else has. And that is amazing. But that is the breaking news and good news. AOC now on board and endorsing Nina Turner in Ohio 11. Let's go vote.
Obviously, I'm happy that AOC has come out to endorse Nina Turner. The primary race in Ohio is tomorrow. So, not to be too critical, but I would have liked to see that endorsement much earlier. And I would have liked to see more endorsements from, certainly the more left-wing members of the Progressive Caucus. We know that there are all sorts of moderates within that caucus who are not at all progressives. But when you think about the Ilhan Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs, people who have really taken the mantle of progressivism in terms of the way they've branded themselves, what are they waiting for? Why didn't they come out and endorse her either today or honestly, I would have preferred much earlier. But I'm glad that this has happened because at least it's made it clear that the leadership in the Progressive Caucus is not being honest with the American people. I want to know why as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, man, can I just say, running for Congress on its own without all the drama is an incredibly difficult thing to do. I mean, seeing what you had to go through, Cenk, was pretty disheartening, discouraging, demoralizing. But to see your friends either abandon you or not have your back is so incredibly painful. And I hate that Nina Turner, someone who doesn't deserve it at all, has gone through this, has gone through it so publicly. Obviously, she has our support. We've defended her. We've done all sorts of coverage about what her platform is really about, something that you won't see on other platforms, on other news organizations. It's just, it's really heartbreaking because she really is a fighter, but that's how fighters get treated in the system. They get abandoned, they get smeared because they actually want to fight for real change.
Yeah, this is not self-aggrandizing. At this point, it is an absolute fact. The only people who don't abandon progressives, especially fighters and leaders of progressives, is TYT Nation, Young Turks audience. And so when no one else showed up for Nina, we showed up from day one, all of you guys. Look, us without you is nothing. Either you give the $5, $10, $27, or you don't. By the way, in this race, we're maxed out. You don't have to give any more money. So the race is tomorrow. We bought as many ads as we could possibly buy. And by the way, we reached everybody in Cleveland 3 times over. So all those establishment people so comfortable thinking they've got it locked up. I can't wait till tomorrow. I don't know what's gonna happen. They might have just overwhelmed us with the money that they spent on television. I don't know, okay? But I do know we gave it everything we had, and I do know that they were not expecting us. And if Nina wins, TYT is going to send its regards. And so I can't wait till tomorrow night. Find somebody in Cleveland, make sure they're voting, make sure their whole family's voting, everybody's voting. I expect a very close election and we can make the difference here. And so, look, I'll take it. Thank you to AOC. Always give credit where credit is due. And if the others say, hey, there was too much pressure on me, well, that's not exactly a profile in courage, okay? And so we have long memories. So Rebellion PAC just spent $200,000 on the Nina Turner race. Will we spend that in the race for incumbents who claim to be progressive, but who weren't there for their allies? No, we will not, okay? But if you're a true progressive and you're a fighter and a leader, well, Rebellion PAC and TYT Nation has your back. So I know the establishment has a lot more weapons. I'll take the Young Turks audience over all of them combined, and tomorrow we might find out.
All right, we're gonna take a brief break. When we come back, man, the fallout from Governor Greg Abbott's decision to do extra checks of commercial vehicles crossing the border is terrible. Looks like his state might be losing business for the long haul. We've got those details and more coming right up.
All right, back on TYT. Remember tomorrow, right after the Young Turks at 8 o'clock Eastern, we're gonna have election coverage of Indiana and Ohio primaries. Those are the most important primaries in this whole schedule. Look, if Nina Turner doesn't win, what's the point? What's the point? They're all gonna go in and do the same thing, which is close to nothing. But if Nina Turner wins, you do not want to miss that moment. That will be a moment of great jubilation. And I will have many choice words for our enemies and for the people who stood by silently. I will have many, many choice words. And Young Turks audience, I love you guys so, so much because there isn't anybody that could pressure you. And you're actually courageous and you actually care and you actually give everything you got. And so I'll fight with you guys versus everyone else on the planet every time, every goddamn time. So come watch the results tomorrow. And honestly, I'm not even taking any more money at Rebellion PAC until we find out what happens with this election. Because what's the point of getting more progressives elected if they don't have a leader and they don't have a fighter, okay? So, but thank God AOC came in the right direction here. I hope that some others have the courage. By the way, they get so offended too. They're like, oh, Cenk, he talks about courage. How dare you? Oh, are you part of the elite now? Is that what you are? Well, I can't criticize you because you're the elites. Yeah, agree to disagree. Okay, I'm telling you, this thing's razor close. For God's sake, find someone in Cleveland that you know, or that even lived in Cleveland and might know other people, and get them and their entire families and all their friends to vote. Okay, Ohio 11, you get it. So now, Eclectic Miscellanea writes in, happy election eve, vote Nina. Colorado Blue Blazer regular says, if that DHS secretary or the secretary of rose-colored glasses or is it the secretary of rose-colored glasses and platitudes? It would appear to be the latter. I think the one time Democrats get strong is fighting against progressives in primaries. They're all out in full force, never fought a Republican in their lives. Never fought a Republican. But once it's Nina Turner, and by the way, God, how scared are they of Nina? They all came out this weekend, almost all the power players. Oh, just can't be Nina, please not Nina, please not Nina. Okay, I love to see those establishment pricks urinating in their pants, worrying about Nina Turner. Send them what they're worried about. Send them Nina Turner and see what that looks like. All right. Worst case scenario, Dragon says, as always, the government will go after poor people and those who don't fit in. Father knows best mold. Almost certainly true. Twitch, 8 months of Bezos bucks, poggers. That's what Nate Dogg says. Dave Schmidt gifted 2 subs. Esto Dragon gifted a sub. Dark Butterfly Dragon gifted 2 subs. Surfer Tim says AOC gives me hope. We'll be back. Hey, back on TYT, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, Jacqueline Carpenter, Lindsay Robb, Negra Marina, Michael Adante, Nick Levine, all these people just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. You know why? Because TYT is too strong. Guys, tomorrow, if Nina Turner wins in Cleveland, that means we're stronger than the entire establishment combined. Because they all came out and they ran into us. Can't wait, can't wait. Go find somebody to vote in Cleveland, Nina Turner. Go, Anna.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott might as well be campaigning in New Mexico because some of his biggest fans reside in that state. And that's because of the fact that he made the terrible decision to do extra security checks of commercial vehicles traveling across Texas's southern border. And that has caused serious delays for commerce. And as a result, now the route has been changed through New Mexico rather than Texas. And in fact, that plan might be expanded in the near future. So again, this has to do with Abbott's decision to do needless extra security checks. And it was all part of his political ploy, his political strategy to garner more support for his gubernatorial race. And it's not playing out so well. In fact, the state already lost $4.2 billion as a result. And things are about to get even worse. So trucks were rerouted through Santa Teresa when Abbott's inspections snarled commercial traffic at Texas border crossings. And now Mexico has decided to move a long planned trade railway connection worth billions of dollars from Texas to the New Mexico crossing. So Mexican Economy Minister Tatiana Clouthier said a planned rail and ports expansion known as the TMEC corridor to connect the Pacific port of Mazatlan and the Canadian city of Winnipeg would not use Texas, but instead the rail line would be routed along the far edge of West Texas up through Santa Teresa, New Mexico, about 20 miles west of downtown El Paso. And listen, the minister for the economy in Mexico explains exactly why they're making this decision. We are now not going to use Texas. We can't leave all the eggs in one basket and be hostages to someone who wants to use trade as a political tool. And as we've reported before, this ploy by Abbott was so disastrous that he had to end it. He put a stop to it after just 10 days. The slow pace of inspections and protests led by truckers upset at the delays led to routine backups of 5 to 12 hours at commercial border crossings. Some truckers interviewed by the Dallas Morning News said they had to wait 3 days just to cross. And if you're transporting, perishable items, you're not gonna make it. Everything's gonna rot in the back of the truck as you're trying to cross the border and get to where you're supposed to go. And so earlier reports indicated, as I mentioned, that Texas lost about $4.2 billion. That's the economic damage that was caused by just 10 days of this terrible policy. Abbott said he will be transferring another $500 million from other Texas agencies to finance his broader state border initiative, Operation Lone Star, which, by the way, is already costing Texans more than $2 billion a year. And look, the reason why this strategy by Abbott was completely unnecessary is because the federal government does the checking, like they do the security measures to ensure that people aren't smuggling humans or smuggling drugs into the country. In fact, it's actually pretty impressive how much the Biden administration has stepped up to the plate in regard to catching smugglers of all sorts of terrible drugs like fentanyl and meth. We'll get to that later in the show. But Cenk, what are your thoughts? You're muted, Cenk.
Sorry, guys. So we get into the usual territories here. One is Republicans doing senseless things for marketing gimmicks. So that's exactly what this was. It made no sense in the first place. And it cost the people of Texas a ton of money, and now long-term might cost them a devastating amount, right? And Republican governors and politicians do this all the time. The problem is the second component, which is the Democrats. The way you stop nonsense like this and bleeding out the taxpayers for your political gimmicks is the other side kicks your ass. So Beto O'Rourke is running against Greg Abbott in Texas. So I'm sure Beto O'Rourke is on this, and I'm sure he's lightly criticizing him, right? But Beto, I can't hear you. I don't know if you understand how politics and media works this day and age. You have to go for the jugular so we can hear you. You have to say things like, Greg Abbott is a piece of crap that costs every taxpayer in Texas, and name a number, whatever the correct number is, $170, $2,000. I don't know what the number is, but find out the number, be real, be factual, and then say, I can't believe he stole that from you, so that he can try to run for president. Okay, it's cowardly, it's terrible, it's despicable, it's evil. Okay, and just lay into him, lay into them, so that people can hear, so that they can hear. But my guess is that Beto will whisper, as he's been taught on NPR. It's not a right thing to do. It's a little bit problematic. Okay, are you going to kick his ass, or are you just going to sit there? So there's no way Abbott should be reelected. He's cost not just the money of taxpayer citizens, he's cost the lives of Texas citizens, I should say. And so the way that he had people freeze to death so his donors could make more money, it's disgusting. Are Democrats ever going to take action and actually fight Republicans? The answer is likely no. So Abbott will probably get away with this too.
Yeah, I mean, look, to your point, the only reason why we even found out about this is because the White House put out just like a gentle press release asking Abbott to stop because it's actually causing more supply chain issues. And at a time when Americans are dealing with inflation, this ain't helping. But it was just that, it was just a press release. And what's also incredible, Cenk, is when you look at the smuggling of fentanyl, for instance, I had no idea that the Biden administration was able to seize 11 times more fentanyl at the border compared to Donald Trump in 2020. How are you not bragging about that?
Yeah, no, look, I hate to beat a dead horse or a dead donkey in this case, but Biden, Democrats, even on rare things you're good at, we can't hear you. How dumb are you? Politics is about marketing. If people don't know you did something, then they're not going to vote for you. Hey, inflation is out of control. You know why? Because the economy is booming and unemployment is at a record low. Did you ever hear that? No, because the idiot Biden never said it. He whispered it. Everybody on his team whispered it. They're so stupid, okay? So now on this, you seize 11 times the fentanyl of Trump. If I was in charge, you know what I'd do? I'd call a press conference and I would show it like Katie Porter does with like jelly beans and M&Ms or whatever. And I'd have like 11 times more than Trump busted. And I'd go, I don't understand why Donald Trump was such a loser. Why did he let all these drugs into the country? The minute we got in charge, we caught all the drugs. It turns out Trump was letting all the drugs in. And then everybody's discussing why Trump was so bad at catching drugs. Instead, JD Vance, as we'll show you later in the show, is blaming it all on Biden. Because Biden whispered it. Losers, total losers.
Well, speaking of total losers, let's now move on to the so-called free speech warriors, people like Donald Trump, who of course have no respect for our First Amendment rights and would rather shoot demonstrators who he disagrees with. Trump wanted to literally shoot demonstrators in the summer of 2020 as they gathered close to the White House. Now, we know about that because Trump's former Defense Secretary Mark Esper is coming out with a memoir, so he decided to sit on this information until he could publish his book. But nonetheless, here's what we know based on this upcoming memoir, which Axios received early review of. So former Defense Secretary Esper charges in this memoir that former President Trump said when demonstrators were filling the streets around the White House following the death of George Floyd, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something. Now, of course, Americans have First Amendment protections. They are allowed to assemble, they are allowed to demonstrate. That is what was happening at that time. This is in June of 2020. But Trump didn't like their protests. Trump didn't like that the demonstrators were partly protesting him. So his big question was, can't we just shoot them? Now, I would love to hear from all of these podcasters on the right who have taken the mantle as free speech warriors, and all they focus on is like a small group of left-wing people on Twitter nagging them about their language. But fact of the matter is, when it comes to actual free speech violations in this country or government officials who want to violate your free speech rights, a lot of them are on the right. On a state level, we have legislation in some cases that's been proposed, in other cases actually passed state legislatures that would allow for drivers to run protesters over if they're blocking the road. You have so many different examples of right-wingers banning books they don't like from public libraries, even if those books have not been assigned to students. But those are stories that are completely ignored. I mean, I highly doubt Rogan's gonna be talking about Trump wanting to shoot demonstrators on his podcast, but he will talk about how his feelings got hurt over a few people on Twitter nagging him about using the proper pronouns.
Yeah. So there's two elements to this story. First, the heart of the story. Holy cow! A president of the United States suggested that we murder protesters. We just killed them. Now, when he said, "Why don't we just shoot them?" and he said that repeatedly, apparently, according to the sources. And by the way, this is not just Esper. This is very important. It got vetted by dozens of people in the Pentagon, including people that were in the room when Trump was suggesting it, and none of them disputed it. It went to print, and it got printed because it is true. So once there was pushback, and they said, "Mr. President, it's not really a good idea to shoot protesters in America. They have freedom of speech. They could ask for redress of their grievances. That's also in the First Amendment. That's exactly what they're doing." He said, "All right, fine. Why don't we shoot them in the leg?" First of all, if you shoot people in the leg, a lot of them will die. Second of all, you're shooting them in the leg. Okay, it's mental. It's insane. And then people want me to have a conversation about whether you should vote for Trump. Oh, you don't like Biden. Biden didn't do enough. Right now, I have a healthy loathing of Joe Biden. But I'm not having a conversation about voting for Donald Trump when his instinct was, let's murder everyone protesting me. No. When he discussed imposing martial law and having military rule in America and ending democracy. No, this is not he said, she said. This is not 50-50, it's not even 90-10. Under no circumstances can that monster dictator wannabe ever be president or have any office again. But then the second portion is what Anna talked about. All you right wingers, God, just say it. And now a lot of them have started saying it. There's this thing called a new right, and they're just saying it. Yeah, we want a dictator, we want a king, because it's the hypocrisy is too much even for them. They know they don't want freedom of speech. They know they don't want freedom. The minute anybody protests them, they're like, well, maybe we should murder them. You don't believe in freedom of speech. So it doesn't, name them all, it doesn't matter. Crowder, Tim Pool, Joe Rogan, you name them, okay? It doesn't matter. They're all cowards. They're all hypocrites. They will never call out their beloved Donald Trump because their fans will get mad at him. Oh, no, you cannot criticize the beloved orange dictator. Okay, then you're not for freedom of speech. You're not. So just shut up already, okay? Now, I don't mean shut up in the government sense. You can blabber all you want, but you're full of crap. And now you know it too. You never believed in freedom of speech. No one who believes in freedom of speech would ever support Donald Trump on this story alone.
And to your point, Cenk, I wanna get to just how many 4-star generals knew about this and might have had a problem with what Trump was demanding they do, but didn't say anything about it publicly, specifically Trump wanting to shoot demonstrators. So let's go to graphic 4 here. As part of the clearance process, the book was reviewed in whole or in part by nearly 3 dozen 4-star generals, senior civilians, and some cabinet members. Some of them had witnessed what Esper witnessed. And again, we didn't know about Trump wanting to shoot demonstrators until today, because Axios was able to review Esper's book, and Esper wasn't public about it until he was ready to publish his memoir. So there's, of course, that element to it as well, where the profit motive behind all of this allows for these government officials to withhold incredibly important information from the American people. This happened in June of 2020. You don't think that it was relevant for American voters to know what Trump was demanding that people do in response to protesters for the 2020 election? Now, obviously, Biden was elected anyway, But I would have liked to know this information. I'm sure a lot of voters would have liked to know this information ahead of time. And despite Esper's best attempts at placating Trump, serving as his lapdog, it's never good enough for Trump because they had a falling out anyway. And it was after Esper spoke out against Trump wanting to use the Insurrection Act in response to the protesters. He did so in a press conference. This was the moment that Trump decided to turn his back on Esper because Esper dared to speak out against something that Trump wanted to do. Let's take a look at the video.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act.
And understand the Insurrection Act would allow for the military to use its force against American citizens, people who are protesting. That is what Trump wanted.
Yeah, it's so easy to prove the right wing as hypocrites. So right now, I guarantee if they see that story, they're like, "Oh, what's the big deal, man? I'm glad that Trump fired Esper. He should have used the Insurrection Act, okay? That's what good, strong presidents do." Okay, great. So you want Biden to use the Insurrection Act and start rounding up all right-wing protesters?
The truckers?
Oh, no, that's government tyranny. That's government tyranny. We can't do that. Well, which one is it, goddammit? Do you want the Insurrection Act or don't you want it? How about martial law? That Trump wanted to do that. Every one of his advisors, and to be fair to them, we give you the actual news. Every one of his advisors said they'd quit if he declared military rule in America. Okay, but Trump wanted it. So is military rule good or bad? Because if it's good, can Joe Biden use military rule? Look, of course, the right wing has the comfort of knowing that Democrats are the weakest people on earth and that they actually believe in democracy. They know the Democrats are never gonna declare martial law. They're never gonna use the Insurrection Act. They're never gonna shoot right-wing protesters. They know that, right? That's why they can say in comfort, yeah, Trump should do that to the left wing, but no one should ever do it to us, right? And so finally, again, I ask you, but what if it isn't Biden? Right wing, are you sure you wanna set this precedent that the president can order the shooting of protesters? Be careful with the precedent that you set. Now, of course, they will say it's great when Republicans do it, and it's monstrous and tyranny when the Democrats do it. Okay, well, at least you know the right wing, as usual, liars, hypocrites, and monsters. These are facts. These are facts. Otherwise, say that Trump was wrong. You won't, because you can't. You just want to follow a dictator so bad. You're so weak that you're like, oh, please shelter me, orange dictator. The right wing disgusts me.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about law and disorder because you have the latest slate of Trump-endorsed candidates coming out and just referring to President Joe Biden as illegitimate. We'll give you the latest example right after the break.
All right, so guys, one other thing I'm gonna ask you today is, if you live in Cleveland, of course you need to vote, and elections now, it's May 3rd is a. But what I'm gonna ask you is, send us comments, whether I read them on air or not, I wanna see them. If you live in Cleveland, did you see Rebellion PAC ads? Did you see Chantel Brown ads? Did you see Nina Turner ads? How much did you see them? Where did you see them? I'm intellectually curious about it. It would be super important for future elections. So let me know if you live anywhere around Cleveland. All right, now, and of course we're gonna cover that race tomorrow. Huge coverage of that starting at 5 o'clock Eastern, Pacific, I should say, 8 o'clock Eastern. All right, on Twitch, Calm Like a Bomb says Republican 101 caused a problem, then blame Democrats, referring to the Abbott situation. 100% right. Ella Tois gifted 2 subs. Myrtle Turtle and Lloyd gifted a sub each, and Sabina is a new sub, we appreciate it. Franklin Sharp Slicer wrote in on Super Chat. Though in Wyoming, this is this poem. Though in Wyoming, the best I and Crunchy Frog can do, we sent the Black Pearl Dragon, that's Nina, a chunk of money or two. We are TYT, that be you and that be me. I love that one. That's a good poem. And Sigma Comics says, like AOC, we're also from the Bronx, and we were at the Cleveland Fan Expo this past weekend, telling people it was Nina Turner time on Tuesday. Comic book companies for Nina. All right, I love that. Thank you, Sigma Comics. Tony Face 2007 says, I remember that as TYT ran to get Ed Markey through to the Senate primary. He said openly that the kids at TYT had his back, not high profile, but he still tries to do the right thing in the Senate. It is true. We did deliver for Ed Markey, he did win. We also delivered for AOC and Cori Bush and many others, and they did win. Let's do it again tomorrow. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Anna's got more news.
All right, let's get right to our next story.
I am a big supporter of President Trump. Obviously, I loved him as a president. His policies worked. America First is the only way out of the mess we're in. And he loves Arizona. He loves our campaign because he knows it's grassroots. And we have a big movement afoot in Arizona. So last week he said, I love Kerry, let's endorse her again. I'm not gonna take orders though from an illegitimate president like Joe Biden. Arizona is gonna do things the Arizona way.
The person you just heard from is Arizona's Trump-endorsed right-wing gubernatorial candidate. Her name is Kari Lake, and if you notice that graphic that Fox Business was showing, she appears to be the Republican frontrunner in the primary. Now, notably, she called President Biden illegitimate, essentially regurgitating propaganda from Trump regarding the outcome of the 2020 election. Now, should we be concerned? I would argue, yes, we should be concerned because recent polling indicates that an unfortunate majority in the Republican Party believes all sorts of unfounded claims and conspiracy theories. And she appears to just be preaching to the choir, essentially telling the voters what they want to hear. And she also put out a list of all the terrible things she would do as governor of Arizona, which we can get to in just a minute. But Cenk, you drew attention to this story for us, and I can understand why.
Yeah, look, chaos is here. If she wins that race, we're gonna have a United States governor say, I'm not listening to the president and I'm not listening to the federal government. What is that? I mean, I guess it's a form of secession. So then are the blue state governors gonna say then if Trump or another Republican wins, okay, we're now not following the orders of the federal government? How many more red states will say they're not following Biden anymore? This is total madness. This is the breakdown of the union. And this is what the Republicans wanted. This is what they pushed for. They've been trying to kill our democracy the whole time. And you can't get through to them. They think, oh yeah, if the government doesn't work together, that's great. If the states don't listen to the federal government and there's anarchy, that's great if it's a Democratic president. If it's a Republican president, then then those governors are traitors and they should be hung up and et cetera, et cetera. It's just, and now literally a majority, 52% of Republicans believe that Democrats are running a child sex trafficking ring. That Democratic leadership is pedophiles. 52%, guys. Polls are accurate. I'm neck deep in politics. I know everybody bitches about polls, and sometimes a poll is a little off here or there. Generally, they are definitely accurate. That is a majority of Republicans, and by the way, 30% of independents. 30% of independents think that Democrats are running a child sex trafficking ring. Combined, that's about 100 million Americans who believe that the Democrats are doing a ring of pedophilia and that's their objective. And now you got people who are leading in their race saying, oh, if I get elected, I'm not even gonna listen to the Democratic president. This is total and utter chaos, anarchy. It's ripping this country apart. And the Democrats can't even freaking counter as the Republicans are on roughshod destroying this country.
I'm curious how this would actually play out, right? And look, you look at how well she's performing in the Republican primary, and Arizona still is a right-wing state for the most part. There's a good chance that she could become the next governor of Arizona. And I'm just curious how it would really play out, right? Because it's one thing to use that kind of rhetoric. It's another thing to actually be elected into office and then try to carry out what she's suggesting here, which is completely ignoring laws that are, or directives, executive orders by the federal government. To play devil's advocate though, I'm curious what you think about this, Cenk. When Trump got elected, of course, he started implementing all sorts of anti-immigration policies. Almost immediately, you have the Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol agents, ICE, rounding up people in communities that are known to have a disproportionate amount of migrants living in them. I remember that happened in like Van Nuys, California in the beginning of the Trump administration. And states like California started to implement these sanctuary state laws to protect the migrants against the federal government. Would you say that the left has a similar approach to what Kari Lake was suggesting here with Joe Biden?
Oh, with the sanctuary cities?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think so. I think that those cities are basically saying, look, we're gonna enforce our local laws. I mean, if there's a federal law that they are violating, then I think that's a different situation. But basically, my understanding of sanctuary cities is saying that they're going to enforce their local laws. So if it's in direct contradiction of a federal law where the federal government says, give me those immigrants, and the local municipality says, no, I will not, I will ignore your federal order, then that's a different case. But I don't believe that's what's happening with sanctuary cities.
So I want to get to what Kari Lake said about her platform and what she's planning on doing once she gets elected, because auditing the election is part of it. Let's take a quick look.
Obviously, we need to take care of what's happening on the border, secure the border, stop the drugs from coming in. No Democrat, no independent, no Republican wants their kids to get their hands on this deadly fentanyl. We have a priority with our election. When I get elected, we are going to go through that forensic audit and we're going to fix every problem we have with our elections down here and make sure they are secure and honest for our future generations in every election going forward. We're going to make sure that we fund the students in Arizona, not the institutions, so that parents have control of what school they send their kids to and that our kids are prepared for all the opportunities. We would like to lower taxes as well. And we're going to start with the sales tax because that affects every single Arizonan. And especially under Joe Biden's inflation, we need to make things more affordable any way we can.
So she wants to waste more of the state's resources in auditing the 2020 election. If the people of Arizona are into that, have at it. It is a waste of resources. I mean, how many times are you going to audit the 2020 election? Trump lost. I know it's a tough pill to swallow, but I mean, again, how many times do we have to go through this? How many court battles did the Trump campaign need to lose because they had zero evidence of widespread voter fraud for his supporters to finally accept the cold, hard truth? He lost the election. If he wasn't such a moron in how he responded to COVID, there was a good chance that he could have won. When it comes to these battleground states, it was actually a pretty close race, but he totally bumbled, like he just ruined his chances of getting reelected. They refused to accept that. So you want to waste the resources? Great, have at it. But the other thing is, look, you guys, pay close attention, because the next thing that Republicans, in my opinion, will succeed in doing is eliminating public schools. They're on the warpath. They're already succeeding in funneling money out of the public education system and into private institutions. She was very clear about how she intends on doing that. And it's gonna be a disaster for families who cannot afford to send their children to private schools. It might start off with a voucher program and people might get hoodwinked into thinking, this is great, the government's giving me money so I can afford private education for my kids. But as soon as public education is no longer an option for people, you think the state governments, you think right-wing governments are gonna shell out money to help poor families send their kids to private schools? Please. Come on.
Look, I'm not even going to say it out loud, but there's a couple of things that a Republican candidate or president could do that would guarantee landslides for them. And if they just believe it, they don't even have to believe it. They just have to do it. A tiny bit of economic populism, they would rout the Democrats, because the Democrats are so corporate, so elitist, such liars, so weak, and then they would get their way. They would get their dictatorship. They would get all these things, but there's no talking to right wingers, Anna. So in Arizona, they did an audit led by a ludicrous right wing group, and even they came back and they're like, "Oh crap! It turns out Biden won, and pretty easily in Arizona." I mean, you want to audit the audit of the audit? What do you want? There's no evidence. But no, they're maniacs. They've been brainwashed by right-wing media into being mindless zombies. Who are like, oh, Trump won, I like dictators, Trump won. What are you gonna, how am I gonna talk to the guy? The guy doesn't even understand facts or logic. So there's 100 million zombies in the country now who are like, oh, Ron Tucker Carlson told me this. Okay, all right, I don't know. This is gonna end very, very poorly. And by the way, on sanctuary cities, it's simply the great majority of the time, the police saying, no, we are not going to ask for documents or immigration status when we're investigating crime, because we're afraid that that would discourage people from reporting crimes like murder, rape, robberies, etc. And that's what a sanctuary city means. It sounds super like scary to the right wingers. Oh my God, they're hiding the immigrants, etc. No, they're actually largely trying to solve crime.
Right, it's the refusal of local law enforcement to cooperate with the federal government's requests pertaining to undocumented immigrants. So, which look, I haven't been critical of that because I think that they should be able to do that, especially when they have a good reason in regard to making the environment safer for people to feel free to come and report actual crimes that they're facing. But I just feel like all the nonsense that we heard from Biden, we were right from the very beginning. Oh, my God, we're gonna unify the country. We're gonna unify the country. There's no unifying with this. Okay, platitudes, concessions to people on the far right is not going to unify the country. There's no way to placate them. There's no way that they ever want to work together. The only thing you can do is focus on what unites voters. And there's actually a lot of agreement among voters on bread and butter issues, which Biden could have focused on, hyper focused on, in order to bring voters together in support of candidates who actually make sense, who actually serve their best interests. But as you mentioned, Cenk, all we saw was weakness from the Democratic Party, and the chickens will come home to roost, both for the midterms and I suspect even for the 2024 election. And it's a damn shame because it empowers crazy people like Carrie Lake. And I think it's likely that someone like her could be the next governor of Arizona. It's absolutely terrifying. Well, we got to take a break. That does it for our first hour. When we come back, Donald Trump had a little bit of a flub where he ended up endorsing an opponent to the real candidate that he endorsed in a Senate race. We've got that story and more coming right up.
Young Turks means the audience. They are the young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists, as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bituation Room. The Bituation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week, so join the Frantifa and listen to The Bituation Room on Google Podcasts. And give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
Tallywhacker.
right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'm going to go with Teixeira. They just hit the join button below on YouTube, became an American hero, helped support Young Turks, get the progressive voice out there, get just truth out there in this world of madness that is more necessary than ever before, let alone fighting for change. We appreciate it. If you're not on YouTube, you can join by going to tyt.com/join. All right, Casper.
Well, let's catch up with some of these Russian oligarchs and figure out what happens when they actually do have the courage to speak out against Putin's war in Ukraine. Russian oligarchs who dare cross Vladimir Putin are now finding out what the reaction from Putin is, and it is to retaliate swiftly. At least that was the case with one Russian bank founder by the name of Oleg Tinkov, who doesn't even live in Russia right now. He actually traveled outside of the country in 2019 to receive leukemia treatments. However, he was the most aggressive in criticizing his Putin's invasion into Ukraine, and the retaliation was in fact swift, which gives us a better idea of how these sanctions are really playing out. Last month, Tinkov, the former, or I should say the founder of one of Russia's biggest banks, criticized the war in Ukraine in a post on Instagram. The next day, he said Putin's administration contacted his executives and threatened to nationalize his bank if it did not cut ties with him. Last week, he sold his 35% stake to a Russian mining billionaire in what he describes as a desperate sale, a fire sale that was forced on him by the Kremlin. He says, quote, "I couldn't discuss the price. It was like a hostage. You take what you were offered. I couldn't negotiate." So he sold his stake, and the bank even turned its back on him immediately. For instance, Putin said, not only must you cut ties with Tinkov, which by the way, the bank is named after him, you also have to change the name of the bank because it's named after this oligarch who dares to cross me and criticize our invasion or our special military operation into Ukraine. He said that he had hired bodyguards, Tinkov did, after friends with contacts in the Russian security services told him he should fear for his life, and quipped that while he had survived leukemia, perhaps the Kremlin will kill me. And he published his criticisms against Vladimir Putin on April 19th. And like I said, the retaliation was swift.
Okay, by the way, I mean, it wasn't just a quip. He's quite serious. Apparently people that are his friends in security, the secret security service for Putin's government, he said, quote, "They told me the decision regarding you has been made." So that's a hell of a thing. So Putin is the dictatorial tyrant that everyone warns about. So if you're in the right wing, this is what tyranny looks like. A guy who says, if you disagree with me, I'll make you sell off all your private property at a 97% discount. That's what he said. He said he got 3% of his money back, okay? And I will probably murder you. That's exactly what tyranny looks like. And so, again, there's a new group called the New Right. Apparently they've been around for a while, but they're backed by a lot of Silicon Valley money. And they're now openly saying, yes, we want dictators. So it's the same guy supporting JD Vance, Blake Masters in Arizona, Donald Trump. And, but for all the fanboys of dictators, how do you know the dictator is gonna be nice to you? Once a dictator is dictator, you know who they normally take out first? The people that are close to them who are a threat to them, or they perceive to be a threat to them. So now, of course, there's the fake left too. Oh yeah, Putin, he's such a misunderstood, lost soul. Like, oh, he's puppy-eyed Putin. He's one of the worst tyrants of my lifetime. And if you're on the left, you would never ever support Vladimir Putin and his, I mean, look, how many people has he tried to murder before that were dissidents or that disagreed with him? How many protesters and journalists has he locked up? The guy's an absolute monster. And in fact, if anyone that is claiming to be on the left defends him, well, good. they've outed themselves. Now, they're not on the left and they're propagandists or the dumbest people alive. So, is Tinkoff's life in danger? Almost certainly. But most importantly, he's been wiped off the face of Russia. He's gone, he's lost almost all his money, and the state has basically grabbed his bank. And there is no private corporations that Putin can't just simply grab with weapons. So Anna, then if you're wondering, okay, what can the oligarchs do? Well, the only thing they could do, and Tinkoff says a lot of them have reached out to him saying that he's actually right, but they're not going to say it publicly, understandably so. They've got to plot against Putin behind the scenes. Otherwise, they're all going to get picked off one by one.
Yeah, and honestly, it remains to be seen whether they are even plotting or strategizing in that way. And it is concerning because, there was a point made on the show last Friday that I thought was a good one, which is, look, we keep hearing about latest round of sanctions. What are we doing? What do you mean latest round of sanctions? Why weren't strict sanctions applied to the most powerful people in Russia immediately? And look, it does also show just how terrible it is to have this reliance on fossil fuels, because even as those sanctions were implemented, you have European countries that are heavily reliant on fossil fuels from Russia. So they were still importing natural gas and oil from Russia. And that obviously provides money. There was this whole issue with Poland not wanting to purchase the fossil fuels with the ruble because, of course, Russia's been cut off from the global financial system, so it could only use its currency during these transactions. And Poland's like, we're not going to do that. And so far, it doesn't really seem like the sanctions are working, which is a concern. I definitely do not want US military aggression. I don't want troops on the ground either, for all the reasons we've explained on the show over and over again. I think the only thing that we've seen actually work is the transfer of weapons to Ukraine so they can actually defend themselves against this Russian invasion. But in terms of the strategy of implementing these sanctions against oligarchs, so far it doesn't really seem like it has worked. And I want to be honest about that. Go ahead, Cenk.
Well, I hear you, but in this story, there's a silver lining about that. I mean, Tinkoff, and let's acknowledge that Oleg Tinkoff is a funny name. Okay, so it's Cenk Uygur, but anyways, Tinkoff is saying that a lot of the oligarchs are hurt financially. And so that's part of the reason they're wondering what they can do. But the answer appears to be not much. So that's why Russia and the whole world's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I have no doubt that the oligarchs are feeling the financial pain, and I'm not shedding any tears for that. That's great. But does that translate to weakening Vladimir Putin? So far, that remains to be seen. And one other thing I wanted to share with you. When Tinkoff published this emotional anti-war post on Instagram, he called the invasion crazy. He derided Russia's military, and I thought this was telling. He said, quote, "Why would we have a good army?" he asked. "If everything else in the country is dysfunctional and mired in nepotism, servility, and subservience." So I'm guessing that didn't sit well with Vladimir Putin, but it does give you a little bit of insight in regard to why Russia's military is as weak as it is when we expected it to essentially crush Ukraine almost immediately. He also says, quote, "I've realized that Russia as a country no longer exists." Tinkoff said, predicting that Putin would stay in power a long time. "I believe that the Putin regime was bad, but of course, I had no idea that it would take on such a catastrophic scale."
Yeah, look, this story scared me for another reason. It's because it's so easy for fascism to win. Once you've got a strong man firmly in charge, they just control who has money, who doesn't, who has power, who doesn't. And in the case of Putin, who lives and who doesn't. And so if that happens here in the US, we're not gonna be able to take it back. And this Putin is dealt with the same exact thing that's happening here in America. Opponents that were too weak and too cowardly to ever effectively oppose him. And when that happens, he becomes entrenched, and then his power multiplies. And now inside Russia, it appears that he has nearly infinite power. And if we allow that to happen here in America, we will get the same exact result. And people who have dictatorial tendencies like Donald Trump, they are barely opposed by anyone in the Republican Party and anyone in the Democratic Party. I mean, as we speak now, the Manhattan DA's office is basically dropping charges, criminal charges against Donald Trump because they're cowards. And this is exactly how a tyrant takes hold. There's a near 0% chance that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or anyone in the Democratic establishment is going to beat a Republican in 2024. You need a progressive, but they would fight that. The Democrats would fight that harder than the Republicans would. So as I see Russia now, I see a foreboding sense of doom for America, because there, but for the grace of God, go us in a couple of years.
All right, happy things to think about as we go to break. When we come back, though, we will go to an epic Trump fail over the weekend. Do not miss it. The video is incredible. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT. Programming notes. Everybody make sure you're watching Watch List. That's with Jared Jackson. That's at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, youtube.com/watchlistTYT. It's a great show. It gets you caught up on all the important stories of the day right in the beginning. And then we've got Old School tonight. Make sure you're checking that out. We got Big Rick Energy tonight. That Big Rick Energy is on twitch.tv/TYT. Old School's right here. That's at 10 o'clock Eastern, Old School is. And then of course tomorrow, big giant day. So that's Indiana and Ohio primaries. You have Josh Mandel versus JD Vance. You have Morgan Harper versus Tim Ryan on the Democratic side on the Senate run. And of course, the main event, Nina Turner versus Shontel Brown. We covered breaking news earlier in the show. AOC has now endorsed Nina Turner, becoming the first person in Congress to endorse Nina Turner this time around. So we'll talk more after the race about what people in Congress could have done, didn't do, should have done, etc. But for now, the most important thing is if you're in Cleveland, you must vote. You must get your family and friends to vote. If you know anyone in Cleveland or anyone who lived in Cleveland, make sure you reach out to them, ask for them for a favor. I know sometimes it can be a little awkward, but I'm doing it too. And it's not that big a deal. Just make one phone call and it can make a giant difference. By the way, if Nina Turner wins, she ran on student debt relief. Biden's teetering on the edge on student debt relief. That would lead to enormous pressure to do student debt relief. If she loses, they'll go back to the status quo. Oh, okay, the voters said do nothing. Yay, we'll do nothing. Okay, so that everything is on the line tomorrow. So find a way to win. And all of you that contributed to Rebellion PAC, contributed to Nina Turner directly, you're all American heroes. You made all the difference and you did all that you could, okay? Now, Henru in our member section says, imagine a world where gym and airport TVs are preset to TYT instead of Fox News. That would be an amazing world. It would make a big difference. And we'll get there, guys, we will. And look, for all the troubles in politics, TYT is doing well, okay? And you guys are amazing. And we're gonna beat everyone else in the media. And that'll make, well, all the difference as long as fascists haven't taken over by then. I Am Sock says, when supply chains change, they rarely change back. Way to go, Abbott. So that is a sarcastic comment, and it's true. Wellington Smith says, I'm pretty sure that Governor Abbott does not care if he tanks the Texas economy as long as he gets a deal to lobby after he leaves office. What a tool. That is also true. Once upon says, I'm beginning to think of politicians as simply corporate or non-corporate, not Democrats or Republicans. Well, that's definitely true. That's right. And there are other branches. There's still non-corporate Republicans who are populist in a terrible way that involves race, bigotry, etc. But at least they're clean on the corporate end, and that's interesting. And on the Democratic side, if they take money from corporate PACs, they're useless. And in fact, they're counterproductive, 100% counterproductive. They will betray you, and they will vote with industry. It's a guarantee. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Cat67. Cat with you, who wrote in. I hope you feel better soon, Cenk. Why, thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate the generous super chat. And Ray Pierce, or Rye Pierce, who just joined. We appreciate you as well. They hit the join button below on YouTube. Everybody else, tyt.com/join. Come join the people that are courageous enough to actually deliver you the news. And every member that signs up is in that category. You guys make this show happen. Anna.
Before we get to the next story, I just want to note, I want you to feel better. I want anyone who gets sick to feel better. But why can't we have the option to keep the raspy voice? Do we all agree that the raspy voice is a good thing? I love the raspy voice. Just saying.
Is that right?
I like it. I don't know if anyone else does, but I think the raspy voice sounds better than people's normal voices. But maybe I'm the only one, who knows?
No, that's a good question. It's a good topic. Maybe we'll talk about it on Old School tonight. Okay.
Love it, love it.
All right, by the way, guys, it's not COVID, so that's the good news, okay? All right, Anna, go ahead.
All right, let's get to our next story.
We've endorsed Dr. Oz. We've endorsed JP, right? JD Mandel, and he's doing great. They're all doing good. They're all doing good.
That was Donald Trump at a rally in Nebraska over the weekend, and he seems to have forgotten who he endorsed in Ohio's Senate GOP primary. It's JD Vance, not JP Mandel. And I should also note that Mandel happens to be JD Vance's political opponent. But that moment was, I'm not gonna lie, pretty delicious. Because while we keep hearing, and I think it's accurate to state that Biden has all sorts of lapses in his memory and all sorts of embarrassing moments. I mean, he referred to Javier Becerra as Javier Baccaria, not a good look. Fact of the matter is, we're dealing with political figures who simply should not be running the country, should not be running for president. And we're gonna keep running into these issues over and over again. Donald Trump might be more boisterous. He might carry himself as someone who's far more secure or far more confident than Biden. But at the end of the day, he makes all sorts of gaffes like this, all sorts of mistakes like this. And I'm sure that JD Vance didn't like the fact that he accidentally spoke well of his opponent during this rally. But I just want to go to one quick tweet, which I loved, from Judd Legum, a wonderful progressive journalist. He says, JD Vance completely abandoned everything he said he believed in to secure Trump's endorsement, and Trump can't even remember his name. Well, at the end of the day, as we all know, Trump looks out for Trump. And so JD Vance, Josh Mandel, tomato, who cares? He's having fun.
Yeah, and so look, there's two parts of the story. One is Trump himself. Right wingers, you got a choice. Either he's so lazy he didn't bother remembering the person who he endorsed and who he wanted to plug, or he's a buffoon and he's like, I don't know what their names are. Who cares? Let's just bungle it. Let's just smear it all over my face. JD, JP, Vance, Mandel. Oh, that's the other guy's name, combined with my guy's name, combined with a butchery of the English language. Blah, right? And right wingers look at that and go, nailed it. I mean, all right, whatever. Or he has dementia. And he just, then I feel bad. He just can't remember anything. TV, cameraman, woman, JP, Mandel, Vance, I don't know. JD, I can't. Covfefe, I don't know. okay? So either he has dementia or he's a moron and a lazy moron. Those are your two choices. Because this is not a small thing, guys. This is not a small thing. He's doing a rally to push those candidates. And there's tons of money, prestige, and his credibility on the line, okay? And then the second thing is, why are politicians so old? Why are there so many politicians in power that are 200 years old? That answer for you in a little bit. But Anna, back to you for now.
Yeah, I listen. Why should the right wing get to have all the fun with conspiracy theories? Why don't we have our own fun with our own conspiracy theories? And so you say there's only two options. You stated what they are very clearly. I would argue there are three options. The third option that you didn't mention is that maybe Trump did this on purpose. Maybe this is retaliation for all the criticism that JD Vance had put out there in regard to Donald Trump when he was running for president in 2016. Maybe this is the strike back that he's been waiting for.
Of course not. And that would require 2 minutes of thought.
That's true.
And there's no way that Donald Trump has the capacity to think for 2 minutes straight. So, by the way, if you're wondering why is Trump backing JD Vance when JD Vance earlier had not only called him an idiot, but potentially America's Hitler, let alone the morals of JD Vance, who then turned around and was like, oh, America's Hitler's endorsing me? I love it, okay? That tells you all you need to know about JD Vance. Josh Mandel is arguably more conservative and more nuts than JD Vance. Everybody's paying attention to this race because of Trump, and you got these two lunatics saying nonstop insane things. But the reality is there is no difference of who the Republicans pick. Both JD Vance and Josh Mandel are full-blown nut jobs, insane right-wingers. They will vote almost identical. They will say things that are nearly identical. They're just having fun as to who's gonna have the bigger ego when they win, right? But the reason Trump is backing the guy who hated him instead of the guy who's more conservative is because Peter Thiel put in $1 million to Donald Trump in 2016. But this time he put in $10 million to JD Vance. So Peter Thiel is a very conservative right winger in Silicon Valley. And Trump sees the money and thinks, when I run for president again, apparently Peter's got a lot of money. If I back his candidates, maybe I'll get some of that green. So that's how this game is played, okay? Now to answer the question of why it seems like every politician is 200 years old. Because this actually does not apply to Trump. It applies to corporate Republicans and Democrats, Mitch McConnell, Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, you name it, right? It's because donors like a return on investment and a safe bet. So both Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and almost all of the corporate Republicans, which are about 99% of the Republican Party, have proven that they can deliver for donors, that when the donors bribe them, they get a good investment back. Well, they don't want to risk it on a new guy. They don't know the new guy. Maybe the new guy doesn't give them everything what they want for the bribe. But they know the older politicians will deliver exactly what they said to the donors. And what did Biden, for example, say to the donors? He said nothing would fundamentally change. And that is the one promise that he has kept. That is why they keep giving to older politicians. That is why they have the money and the power to crush the younger candidates and keep winning elections.
Exactly. Well, since we're on the topic of JD Vance, why don't we move on to the next story, because it really does highlight just how insane he is, how he is a smear merchant who likes to instill fear among the electorate. Let's get to that story.
It does look intentional. It's like Joe Biden wants to punish the people who didn't vote for him, and opening up the floodgates to the border is one way to do it.
That's JD Vance arguing that Biden is intentionally opening the border. He has an open border policy in order to make the lives of people living in his state of Ohio even more miserable. This is intentional. His rant gets even worse. And he even suggests that Biden is interested in essentially executing this master game plan that physically hurts voters in middle America. Let's watch.
That if you wanted to kill a bunch of MAGA voters in the middle of the heartland, How better than to target them and their kids with this deadly fentanyl? And I mean, the crazy thing, of course, is it's not just drug addicts who are affected by this, right? I mean, of course, most of our voters are not people who are suffering from some addiction, but they know a lot of people who are, right? Their kids are affected by it. A lot of grandparents, man, who are taking care of grandkids that they weren't expecting to take care of because this fentanyl killed their children, right? And those grandparents had to step up. So it's really a border crisis that has gone all over the country. It's not just the southern border states that are affected by it, it's everybody. And man, it does look intentional.
So there is a tiny, tiny kernel of truth in what he's saying, and I want to address that. What is not at all true is that the Biden administration intentionally has an open border policy to allow for the flow of illegal drugs into the country to kill off right-wing voters. That is, I mean, just the biggest smear, biggest hyperbole, and also it just shows how little the right wing really knows about Democratic strategy and how, I mean, look, when you look at how weak Democrats are, the idea that they would do something so heinous is so insane. But putting that aside, he is right in pointing out what is happening in Middle America, what's happening across the country in regard to drug overdoses. In fact, in 2020 alone, 2,000 homeless people in Los Angeles County alone died on the streets as a result of drug overdoses. We're talking about fentanyl, we're talking about meth. Yes, these drugs have been smuggled into the United States through our southern border. However, it's also important to focus on the difference between how the Trump administration handled that versus how the Biden administration handled that. And this is where the Biden administration drives me crazy, because it wasn't until I started researching this story today that I realized that Border Patrol under the leadership of President Joe Biden has been far more effective in seizing drugs as these smugglers are trying to smuggle it across the border. I want to give you those details in a moment, but Cenk, I also wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in regard to what JD Vance said there.
Yeah, so the Republicans have realized there's no bottom of the barrel. You could just say the most hideous things. There'll be no pushback. There'll be no check on them, and all their voters will believe it instantly. He said that Biden is trying to intentionally kill MAGA voters. That's insane, insane. By the way, I mean, we're gonna talk about fentanyl, et cetera, but JD Vance got famous off of Hillbilly Elegy. That's a book that he wrote, got turned into a movie, and that's about the opioid crisis. That has nothing to do with Mexico or drugs coming across the border. That's American drug companies. And JD Vance knows that. He's studied it, he's researched it, he's an Ivy League graduate. He knows that talking about immigration in that context or border crossings in that context, which he's done many times before, is just a flat out lie. And it's actually drug companies that are funding the Republican Party that caused the mess in the first place. But it's kind of inconvenient to say, oh, my donors and the donors of all my colleagues are the ones who actually killed you for profit. And all of my friends in the Republican Party and a lot of them in the Democratic Party allowed that to happen because they were getting donations from drug companies. Well, that doesn't sell as well. Scary brown man, and Biden let him kill you. That sells really well in Republican circles because it's not close to true. It scares the bejesus out of right wingers. And what's the number one defining trait of right wingers? Fear. They're deathly afraid of everything. They don't think, they're not logical. They just go, oh, I'm scared. And then they just go vote for Republicans that scare them the most. And Democrats have no effective pushback. There is one, Anna, there is one group of people in politics, though, that did almost intentionally kill MAGA voters. That would be right-wing media, pundits, and politicians who told them COVID's no big deal and you shouldn't get vaccinated.
Take ivermectin.
Yeah.
Take ivermectin, even though there's absolutely no evidence indicating that it serves as a prophylactic or a treatment, an effective treatment for COVID. Don't get vaccinated, don't wear masks, don't social distance, open up businesses prematurely. And I'm talking about the very beginning of the pandemic in the early stages in 2020. I mean, you even had the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, flat out say on cable television, yeah, some elderly people might die, but saving the economy is more important. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was very clear about what his intentions were there. But again, in order to ensure that the truth gets out there, you would need the party that serves as opponents to people like JD Vance to come out and aggressively spread that message. And we have not seen that. In fact, to that point, we have not seen any type of aggressive or effective campaigning from Democrats, particularly the Biden administration, which again, to repeat myself, has actually done a much better job in catching these smugglers before they're able to smuggle a lot of these drugs into the country, okay? And I don't think we should in any way minimize the reality. There is high demand in this country for things like Mexican fentanyl and Mexican meth. We need to address why that is. And no one is addressing that. There's also an interesting way that the right wing talks about addiction, handles addiction when it impacts their communities. Because when it impacts their communities, they see those who are addicted to drugs as victims. When it impacts communities of color, they see those communities as the bad guys. Oh, these are losers, these are bums, these are people who can't take control of their lives, can't pick themselves up by the bootstraps. I just want to make it clear that there is a difference in the way that they handle these conversations, depending on which communities they're referring to. Now, putting that aside, let's talk about what the reality is at the border and then compare it to Trump versus Biden. So, Laredo, for instance, Laredo, Texas, is the front line in the United States government's long and often demoralizing effort to stop illegal drugs at the border. US Interstate 35 runs from here all the way to Duluth, Minnesota, right up the middle of the United States. For long haul trucking, it is the highway equivalent of the Mississippi River, a central artery into the American heartland. So when you talk about these drugs being smuggled past the southern border, straight to middle America, there is some truth to that. Now, more than 100,000 Americans are dying each year from drug overdoses, and most of those fatalities are in fact linked to fentanyl. Overdoses from fentanyl have become the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 45, according to the latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now let's talk a little bit about what the Biden administration has managed to do versus what we saw during the Trump administration. CBP's Laredo field office seized 588 pounds of the powerful synthetic opioid fentanyl during the 2021 fiscal year, an 11-fold increase over the 50 pounds, just 50 pounds detected in 2020. Cocaine seizures at the Laredo port of entry doubled last year. And CBP seized more than 190,000 pounds of meth in total at US borders, nearly 3 times the amount confiscated in 2018, when of course, Donald Trump was the president. The amount of cocaine and fentanyl seized at the border at 8 Texas ports of entry increased significantly last year during the Biden administration, keeping massive amounts of the drugs out of the country, according to US Customs and Border Patrol, Border Protection. And we all know that that government agency is not some sweet little left-wing organization or agency. So the fact that they are putting that data out there means quite a bit. And then let's take a look at this graph because it shows you, it helps you visualize the difference. National drug involved overdose deaths really did shoot up in 2020 under Donald Trump's watch. And look, I think that the COVID pandemic also had a lot to do with it. But for the right wing, for JD Vance to pretend as though A, Biden has an open border policy, and B, he's intentionally allowing for the flow of these harmful drugs into the country to intentionally kill right-wing voters is one of the most disgusting and dishonest smears I've heard from a right winger, and that's saying something.
Okay, now, if Democrats were effective, they would do a giant press conference here talking about how much more Biden has caught in fentanyl crossing the border than Trump has. And they would say, why did that loser, Donald Trump, not catch any of the drugs coming in to the country that's killing your kids? I can't believe Donald Trump let all of these drugs into the country. If there's drugs in there now, it must be the ones Donald Trump let through the border because he didn't do anything to stop the fentanyl. These are facts, these are provable facts, okay? Instead, here's what the Democrats will say.
Totally. Totally.
Of course, right? And everybody will hear JD Vance, and especially because he said it in an outrageous way, and it'll get stuck in people's heads. And then once you ask them afterwards, who let the fentanyl into the country, 90% of them will answer Democrats. Because the Republicans know how to get their message out, including through controversial statements, and the Democrats have no idea how to counter them, and are the most incompetent party that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
We have to take a break, our final break of the show. But when we come back, some suspicious cryptocurrency activity involving Alex Jones, who just recently filed for bankruptcy. We'll give you those details and more when we come back.
We're not gonna have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me.
Beta.
All right, back during the social break here. Neil Pritchard, Will Flemmer, both of them American heroes, just joined by hitting that join button. Where is it? Oh, right below the video. All right, if it's on mobile, you scroll down a little bit more and you'll see it. If you're gonna join, if you're not on YouTube, where do you go? TYT.com/ you'll never guess it. All right, join. Okay, so anyway, Neil and Will, you guys are awesome. We appreciate it. Great to have you as part of TYT. Back Alley Burrito writes it on Twitch. Love Jank, you use the same words as everyone else, but the things you say just blow my mind. Well, I appreciate it. That's wonderful of you to say.
Can I just jump in? That handle was amazing. Was that Back Alley Burrito?
Yeah.
It's amazing. You know, I heard Back Alley burritos are the best kinds of burritos, just saying.
Well, they have used the same words as everyone else, but made them an interesting combination. So right back at you, Back Alley Burrito. High Anxiety Dragon Girl wrote in, OMG, a year on Twitch just for you, TYT. That's great. Now we go to Super Chat. HC writes in, right wingers want a man to rule over them. Beta. Exactly right. Robert says, Disinformation Board equals Ministry of Truth. Anthony McClendon says, in the 1800s, a town asked Texas cowboys to stop bringing their cattle drive through there because of cowboys, drunken roadies. The cowboys changed their route and the town went bust. Hashtag Greg Abbott. Okay, so that you got a lot more of that to look forward to in Texas with Greg Abbott in charge. RC Chick writes in, remember since 2016, can't donate to US politics because I'm a Brit, but here's just a little something for you guys. P.S. It was me who sent the big box of sweets. Wow, thank you, RC Chick, we appreciate it.
Oh my God, you're the best. You're the best. You have no idea, like my favorite kind of Scooby snacks. I really, really enjoyed those and appreciated those snacks, so thank you for that.
Thank you guys, we appreciate it. Cooper the Copper Dragon says, $5 for Jenk's voice. I'll use it to try to get it back by tomorrow. Tomorrow's an important day. Either tomorrow will be backbreaking or tomorrow will be the greatest political day of our lives. So how's that for drama? Tony Face 2007 says, Michael Cohen recently said that Trump always wanted to be the richest person on earth, and that in a second term, dictator Trump would go after the wealth of Bezos plus Musk, much as MBS did after their king's death. So MBS probably is Mohammed bin Salman might be a good role model for Donald Trump, and he has said pleasant things about him. So a lot of folks have a lot of things to look forward to. And by the way, Peter Thiel and all those guys who are looking forward to dictators, be careful what you ask for. That dictator might like your money. Julia says, please stop lauding the unemployment rate. They used that system to pay people during COVID, kicked off at the same time. So of course that made the lowest in history because many haven't worked for 2 quarters since the last UI check. Julia, I hear you on all that. But I'm just saying Democrats should make their case, which would include low unemployment numbers, but they're not making any case. Jason Ray says, I just wonder how much longer the Dear Orange leader will put up with the most loyal, not bringing their wives in front of him. back on TYT. I love those shirts we have on shoptyt.com with Ketanji Brown Jackson, and it says overqualified. I love it. All right, I'm gonna read that one super chat that I didn't get a chance to read because it's funny. Jason Ray wrote in, I just wonder how much longer the Dear Orange leader will put up with his most loyal not bringing their wives for him to grab P word for them. Weak. You think he won't do it? As a sign of loyalty, you must bring your wife. You know who he's gonna do it to first? Of course, Ted Cruz.
Oh my God.
And Ted Cruz will instantly do it. That's how beta the Republicans are.
No, look, whether Trump would ask for something like that, I don't know. But the prediction that Ted Cruz would comply is the most accurate prediction of all time.
He'd line up first. He'd volunteer. He's like, can
Please
you grab
take
me
my
too?
wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's save this for the members only bonus episode, okay? I don't want to get too raunchy here. This is the main show. We keep it classy, all right?
Oh, you do?
Not really.
That memo never got to me. But yes, the bonus episode is raunchier. As you have members, you have that to look forward to. tyt.com/join.
All right, well, let's move on to Alex Jones. There's some suspicious behavior here that we need to discuss. So, an unidentified individual donated over $1 million in cryptocurrency to Alex Jones. So Alex Jones has got a fat crypto wallet, and the question is, who made the donation? And what's the reality of his financial situation here? So let's go to what is reported by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The person donated 26 Bitcoins to Jones, which traded at around $40,000 a piece at the time of the transaction. During an investigation of Jones's known crypto wallets, Hate Watch found that he demonstrated an increased appetite for cryptocurrency starting in April of 2021. Around the same time, that industry boomed, and his standing in the Sandy Hook defamation lawsuit took a significant blow. So he recently filed for bankruptcy, not personally, but InfoWars and all of the affiliated businesses filed for bankruptcy. And it's a way that rich people tend to protect their assets if they're expecting a significant and costly ruling through the courts. And in this case, he was taken to court by the family members who had lost their children in the Sandy Hook massacre. Alex Jones spewed all sorts of lies in regard to that shooting being a false flag operation. As a result, the family members who had lost their children were being harassed and threatened and targeted by members of Alex Jones's audience. And so he lost that defamation suit. It's unclear how much he's going to have to pay out, what the amount is going to be by this judge. But nonetheless, he filed for bankruptcy. Now we're learning more and more about how much is being donated to him through cryptocurrency to his crypto wallets. And just to give you some more details on that, Jones received the money at 4:35 a.m. coordinated universal time, according to the blockchain timestamp, which would be just before midnight in Texas, where the InfoWars host lives. Jones listed 3 different Bitcoin addresses on his website, InfoWars, starting in April of 2021. The address the anonymous donor sent the Bitcoin to is the 3rd one, opened on March 30th of 2022. Jones then added a 4th wallet to his website on April 28th. Donors had sent that address Bitcoin across 42 transactions worth a total of about $37,000 at the time of transfer, before the anonymous mega donor filled it with 26 Bitcoin. And by the way, homeboy made hundreds of millions of dollars in a short period of time by slanging ridiculous supplements that somehow his audience thinks they should buy. So like the idea that he even needs to take donations is really mind-blowing. The idea that people who admire him would shell out money when he doesn't really need it is ridiculous. But Cenk, you also have a take in regard to why he filed for bankruptcy and what is really going on in terms of protecting his assets.
Yeah, we're gonna find out if there's any rule of law in America, and I'm very much afraid of the answer. So Look, he's obviously hiding his assets because he's losing these lawsuits. There's no question about it. He moved all the money out of his companies and now is saying, oh, golly gee, they're bankrupt. Is the court gonna chase down where he moved the money? Is the court gonna chase down this $1 million in Bitcoin? I don't know. I mean, our courts have also been incredibly weak. And this doesn't apply to Republicans as much as it applies to rich people. There's, when it comes to politics, Democrats are scared of their own shadow and barely even criticize Republicans and never hold them accountable. But in the judiciary, it's just a little bit different. It's that it's rich people that they never hold accountable. Oh, you want to hide your assets? Oh, golly gee, we just couldn't find them, right? And so this is a perfect case for the courts to do accountability. Will they? Well, in a manner of speaking, the jury's out. So, by the way, the sucker who gave him $1 million, the guy already has all the money. He doesn't need it. He moved $165 million, as far as we can tell, from just his merchandising out of those companies. So you just gave him his $166 million. And when you give donations to Alex Jones, it's not like he's promising you that he's gonna deliver anything with it for you guys. He's just gonna say, I'm gonna keep it. But that's the thing with right wingers. They're a fool and his money are easily parted. And so they're like, oh, you're not even gonna do anything for me. But sure, here's $1 million. Oh, you're gonna hide it from the law? I love it. Let's use Bitcoin and hide it together. Here, take my money. And then, of course, finally, Alex Jones. Oh, these NFTs, these Bitcoins, they're the devil's work, Satan. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm getting it. Oh, they're wonderful. They're awesome. It's Satan's work not to take the Bitcoins and the NFTs and the blah, 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 blah. How does anybody believe him? Jesus, man. I despair of humanity.
Now, Jones has transferred a total of $1.3 million in cryptocurrency out of his wallets, his crypto wallets, just to give you a sense of how much money has been donated to him through cryptocurrency. And look, Cenk, I don't know about you, I'm just really happy that this system exists because this is democracy. Cryptocurrency has really democratized things. And thanks to cryptocurrency, we now have a man who might be able to evade having to pay the consequences for the pain and suffering he caused to parents whose children were brutally gunned down in a mass shooting. Awesome. I can feel the democracy now. It just feels so good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And no, but there's one important thing there. Again, right-wing hypocrisy here. They love probably that Alex Jones got to keep this money and didn't give it to the family members that he terrorized. By the way, that donor, what a class act that guy is. He's like, oh, you terrorized the parents of dead children? Here's $1 million. That's the right-wing mind for you, right? But if you were to say, hey, cryptocurrency allowed Hunter Biden to keep $1.3 million and he transferred it out of his account right away, and there's no regulation, there's nothing you can do about it, they'd be like, how dare he? Hunter Biden is the worst. That's an old cryptocurrency. It's leading to corruption. We can't have this happen. They do it for Alex Jones. They're like, yay. Republicans couldn't spot hypocrisy on a map. I mean, they're just.
No, they know they're hypocrites. They love it. They're shameless. And I think that's the big difference between the right wing and the fabulously wealthy in this country. It's the shamelessness, right? Like just zero F's given about how shameless they are. They don't care about being called hypocrites. They're like, yeah, we're hypocrites. I mean, I have to mention, it happens on the highest levels of our government as well, with people like Mitch McConnell, blocking the confirmation process for Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, and noting that he's doing it because there's a year left until the presidential election, but then there's only like a tiny amount of time until the 2020 elections. And of course, he immediately rushed the confirmation of now Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Of course, they're hypocrites, but they don't care. They're shameless. But the thing that I'm actually envious of, and I wish we had a little bit of this on the left, is they understand power. That's it. That's all they see. That's all they understand, power. Power takes priority over being called names like hypocrite. So they don't care. They don't care if you call them hypocrites. They don't care if you call them shameless. Because at the end of the day, everything that they do is about accumulating power, evading any type of consequence or responsibility for their actions. They want to win. And I'm a little envious of that.
Yeah. Well, to be fair to the Democrats, Anna, they do that if they're in a primary against progressives.
Exactly. Yep.
Then all of a sudden they're obsessed with power. They'll do any trick. They'll be hypocritical. Oh, we never endorse against an incumbent. Oh, it's Ed Markey in a primary. We're going to endorse against an incumbent, right? And I can name you 1,000 hypocrisies that they did just for power if they're running against progressives. So what does that show you? The progressives are the ones that actually have the actual Democratic policies, and like $15 minimum wage, with Medicare for all, child tax credit, paid family leave, student debt relief. Those are all progressive ideas. They're all economic populist ideas that the country loves. The Democratic Party currently, they don't view their job as getting those policies passed. They view their job as killing those policies on behalf of corporate donors while pretending to be in favor of them. So they kind of do use power ruthlessly. They just use it against their own. And it's good cop, bad cop. We're caught in the middle. And for all those right wingers, like, oh yeah, but then you would like it if Hunter Biden stole the money through Bitcoin. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, right.
I would want to regulate against Hunter Biden the same exact way that I would want to regulate against Alex Jones. So for them, they can't understand in their minds, and this includes corporate Democrats as well as Republicans, the idea that someone would actually have principles. Yes, right. We have principles and we're proud of them.
Exactly. Instead of just cheering on a tribe, favoring one tribe over the next. If both tribes are deeply corrupt and problematic for the future of this country, they should both be called out, and we do so aggressively. The idea of wanting to protect Hunter Biden, like, I can't think of anything more laughable. I have no interest. I don't care about Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, though, so far, based on the attacks that he's been dealing with from the right wing, is largely irrelevant. He's not in a position of power, so I don't really care what Hunter Biden is up to, whether it's with his addiction or his sex life or any of that. But the right wing's pretty obsessed with that, and that's all they focus on.
Like, well, we found one bad guy on the Democratic side, kind of. He's not really in politics, but we'll pretend he's the most important guy. But right wingers, what are you going to do with them? If you're the Democrats, nothing. You're just going to let them win. Okay, we got to go. Bonus episode. We do have one hilarious story of police incompetence. You'll be amused by it for a change. TYT.com/join, or if you're on YouTube, hit that join button below. It's staring at you, going, please hit me. Join. Okay, take him up on it. We'll see you there.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover.